Hi, I'm Courtney Picou, and welcome back to Reconnection Blueprint, where we give practical strategies and tools to help you let go of limitations, hear God's voice, and embrace empowered living, not only for your own life, but for your family, your city, and your nations. And today I have Dr. Michelle Schrader with Recall Healing USA. And from what I understand, you've been doing it for a little over 15 years, almost 17 years. And I think that now is such a pivotal time for us to be having this interview. I believe that it's timely with everything going on in our world today, the chaos. So I'm just gonna, the reason why I picked Dr. Schrader is, I mean, not only has she helped Mark and Michelle, Mark and Melissa Dunmois, who is also on the interview series. I was introduced to by them, and it's changed my life. It shifted me. I used to always be sick and worried and broken, and this whole concept and technique has just really shifted everything for me. It's helped me embrace who I really am called to be, and you're just such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and I just really appreciate you for being on the show. And and there's just so many accomplishments that you have, so I was going to let you speak to a little bit of it as we dive into this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. It's wonderful to be here. It's an honor to be with you and also to see your growth. And it's interesting because when I hear you, what Recall Healing has done for you, exactly what it's done for me too. And so I might just be a little bit on the path a little bit longer than you, but not, like that's really the only difference. So I appreciate being here and love the opportunity to share this word with other people.
Thank you so much. And one of the things that we have our experiences. So I was going to ask you, what's your story, your experience that even led you into the field that you do and what you do today that you share with everyone?
Sure. So, it actually comes because of really from the trauma that my mom endured as a child. My mom was given up for adoption. She was in 13 different foster homes before she was actually adopted. And she had experienced tons and tons of trauma. So growing up with a mom that has tons of trauma, there's trauma in the house, and not maybe so overt, but certainly trauma in the house, and especially living with a mom that is so wounded. And so that sort of began a thirst for me and what we call Project Purpose, which is the 18 months before a child is born, and then the pregnancy and the delivery and the whole first year of life. Well, that in my Project Purpose, there was a message that was given to me to help people to stay alive, to help my mother to stay alive because she really wanted to choose death by suicide. And so my job became to help her to stay alive. Oh, Mom, you don't want to commit suicide, or choose death by suicide, I should say. Mom, we love you. We want you around. Well, that sort of led me into wanting to help other people. And so initially it was probably from a codependent way. But, in 20 years in therapy of trying to sort of figure it out and really, challenging times in my life and all of these kinds of things, then I found Recall Healing. And that from the moment I sat in a workshop, my very first workshop, I knew that this is what I wanted to do for my life. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Me too. The moment that I was introduced to Gilbert, I was like, wait, hold up. This sounds a little hokey, but wait, it sounds so truthful. Like it was one of those burning bush moments where I do I want to turn aside or because it's a little weird to me.
Right.
It's completely outside of my theology. And then I was just like, well, no, I get to break some theology here. And I leaned in. Actually, I was going to ask you if you could just explain a little bit, like briefly, what Recall Healing really is.
Sure, for sure. So in a nutshell, Recall Healing is where we take the physical issues that are going on in the body and we look for the emotional or the traumatic stories behind that. And so if a person has a cancer or a depression or extra weight or certain behaviors. It doesn't really matter. There's a reason for that manifestation. And when you look for underlying conflicts and really challenges in the life, this is what recall healing is about. And so we say recall because the moment that you recall something, you're remembering or you're going back and you're sort of looking at things. Well, whatever happens in our daily life is actually a mirror for what has happened from before. And many, many times I hear, oh, I don't remember things well. Things are very, like I don't have a good memory. I hear that 99% of my day. This is what I hear. And yet I said, don't worry, because trauma keeps us from remembering certain things. And so if we have big traumas or hard life or things like that, we may not remember it. But we use the here and now to give us insight as to what has happened before. And then I teach tools, what we call the letting go exercises. I use my PhD to help people. So I use imagery, help people to understand about food and nutrition and these kinds of things, and how most of the time what we're experiencing is not really relative to us. It's really about our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and the moment that we were conceived a little bit before, like I said before, and all the way through our life. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. And then there's very specific ways of learning how these tools can be applied.
There's so much in that.
I'm sorry, I know.
No, I mean, like in a good way. Do you have an example in which, like just a specific example that you can kind of relay that in? Like I've got like an emotional conflict, or you've had someone who they're broken, they've had an emotional conflict or a trauma, and just identifying that story, like kind of basically what you just gave in a nutshell, just
Sure.
because I know that this is really kind of new for a lot of people, even though it's been around for
Right. Exactly, which is interesting because it seems like so many times I hear people say that it's new agey. Well, I have a master's in theology, and so it's really, actually, I thought it was by mistake that I got a master's in theology, but I can't tell you how many times that I've used my theological background to show people this is actually rooted in biblical teaching, and that it never goes against natural science and the biology. Okay. And so I will give you the perfect example. I have many examples, but for me, what holds true very clearly is my grandson. My grandson had a brain tumor 5 years ago. And it was all of the things that I teach about our own life experiences, our project purpose, and the ancestry is all there for him. And so the story was that my son and daughter-in-law weren't married when they got pregnant with him. It was a bit of a trauma because she was younger, and there was 5 years difference for my son to her. So it was sort of a big deal. And then they didn't get married for a while after, Adam was born. And then there was a party to welcome the baby in. And so my daughter-in-law's dad's best friend, who they called Uncle, he came to my son and he said, "Hey, come here, I'd like to talk to you." So he takes him aside and he says, "If you do anything to that little boy or to my niece, I will kill you." And he held a gun to him. And so, it was a big deal. They almost broke up over it. And so it was a question. It was a question about my son's integrity. What kind of guy is he going to be? And also about protection. Is he going to protect the baby and my daughter-in-law? What's it going to be like? And so Adam grows up. Nothing happens at that time. But what we understand is that for a child, if the parents, are threatened, then they could die without the parents. It's all about biology. It's all about real nature. Okay, so if the parents aren't there, the infant will die. And so it's like a download to the parent, but the trauma is felt to the children. So it was my son's trauma at that moment, but the baby felt it because it was a big trauma. Okay. And
Mm.
then they're barely making it in California. It's hard. They're having a hard time. They decide to move to Minnesota. So they moved to Minnesota, and while my grandson was just getting ready to start school, it's like his first year, he has a little bit of a speech impediment. He dresses funny because he's a California kid and he likes flip-flops, okay? And he doesn't like camouflage, okay? And so the kids start making fun of him and teasing him and sort of, and then the big kids on the big playground, they were right next to the kindergarten kids. And one of the big kids there's the first snow season that they had experienced, and Adam was on the playground, and this kid was bullying another kid. And then Adam said, "Don't bully him." So the big kid takes Adam's head and shoves it in the ground. Okay, it's a conflict for him. He feels scared. He doesn't want to go to school. And a month later, after this all happens, and I know it's a little bit of a convoluted story, but they're all there, okay?
Mm.
So a month after that incident happened, the guy who threatened my son 4 years before, he suddenly died. Okay. So the big trauma of moving from California, not really having friends, having this, then they're living in a basement apartment where there was a lot of mold. Okay. None of the other family members got sick, but my grandson started getting sicker. 2 weeks after the death of this guy, he starts exhibiting symptoms. And for 5 months, he's getting sicker and sicker. We have no idea that he has a brain tumor. But then we did a Zyto, okay? And a Zyto is some biofeedback. And you put your hand on a pod and it runs a test of your body and it shows different things. Well, it showed mycobacteria in the cerebellum, okay? Well, mycobacteria is the byproduct of mold. And so it was completely surrounding what was a baseball-sized brain tumor in the cerebellum. Cerebellum being related to protection and integrity. My son was threatened. My grandson was threatened. Okay? And so there's all of these incidences. There was even another threat against my son. So it's sort of an interesting thing. So once we began to understand what was actually going on, my son talked to my grandson's picture. It's all about energy, okay? That the universe is energy. And so he talked to his picture and he said, "Honey, this was daddy's issue. This was not your issue. And I release you from carrying this issue for the rest of your life. This is not for you to carry. It's done. It's over with." 2 hours later, Adam is jumping up and down. His color has returned. He's a different kid. He was still very sick, but once they understood that it was a brain tumor and they removed the brain tumor was benign and not malignant. And this is what we have begun to understand, that when people have an issue, an ongoing issue, sort of like a pebble in our shoe, a little emotion, a hard time at work, boss that gives you a lot of grief, being sexually abused, being raped, being stolen from, all of these things cause this secret suffering in our head. And when our brain finally says, you can't go on at this energetic level anymore, we're going to download it from the psyche into the body until you can resolve your problem. Well, then a person might get diagnosed with a certain something, and then they think it's the cancer, this, or this, or this, or this. No, it's on what was going on before. And when you make the awarenesses and you bring it to the surface and you name it and you claim it and you work on it, you come to peace about it, then your body will do the same thing.
I've heard you tell that story so many times, and it's showing up so different for me in this time and in this space. Like, just really getting that. I've used that technique that you just talked about, like talking to the picture, and I've even shared that with other people, like my best friend concerning her children, and Melissa Dumont has talked about how healing that is. But Wow. Yeah, just becoming aware of the story. One of the things that I often talk with my own clients about is the emotional trauma and how there is a vibration and a frequency to it. And I talked to Dr. Bradley Nelson about it and how, it could be the smallest little vibration. And I think you just really tied it up in a nice little knot with concerning the story with your grandson of, whenever it's there long enough, it's just like if you took the most minute vibration on glass, and if you leave it there long enough, eventually the glass is going to break. And that's what happens with our bodies until we finally go back and deal with the number one thing that we, especially Americans, like to avoid our emotions in the past. Like we just don't want to deal with them, like the stuff. That's what we've been trained to do. Like that's a limitation in and of itself is, okay, well, I have to always show up tough and strong. I don't have to have, I can't have emotions. No, I don't need to process them. So I think you really just hit everything at every single point, just in that one story. That's a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I mean,
That's it's really sort of fascinating, and he's 10 years old now, so that was 5 years ago. And I also used emotion code. So Bradley Nelson's work actually is amazing, and I really love it. It's so cool because with his work, the emotion comes, okay, and then the story will come from the emotion. With recall healing, the story comes and then the emotion comes. And when you use the two together, it can be quite powerful. But you don't have to. And that's what I love about recall healing. Recall healing really is my foundation. And then, some of the other things. And I also didn't mention too, it's interesting because so it was the life experience. It was a project purpose of what had happened before he was born, but it was also the ancestor syndrome. Because when my son, Tim, his father, was an infant, my ex-husband and I were having very big problems. And my dad said in jest, "Oh, we should have taken him out to the cornfield and shot him while we had a chance." Okay. It's the same thing. My son is a number two. His father, he lines up with his father. This Adam lines up with them. So when we say line up, they carry the same energetic makeup, the same birth order number, or in the same line of them. So it's crazy when you see it like that.
it is, and man, it's just so much. But God, it's so biblical. It's so biblical. I mean, God said curses and blessings to the third and the fourth generation, and that's really what you're talking, the ancestral line is, the things that are in our DNA that's downloaded to us, and everything involved in that. So there's just so much. We could probably do like 10 interviews and
We probably could.
scratching the surface here.
So maybe we start a series of this.
Oh my God, yeah, we should totally do just a series on this. Girl, right now my juice is flowing. Awesome. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was, and you really just shared one. Actually, you shared two because you talked about the releasing exercise as well. Like, what's a personal habit that you attribute to your success and even like your health and wellness, like business and what you do, and for your personal life?
So I think the key is walking our talk. That I really just began practicing these tools. I really began taking more responsibility in myself and not pointing the finger at, oh, this is my mom's fault. This is my father's fault. I wasn't really wanted. No, I began to own that. No, maybe for the only reason that my mom and dad came together was to bring me into this world. And look at what I get to do with my life. And so I began to reframe the way I thought about things. I began to change perspective. I began to see my value. It took a very long time to really see that. And from time to time, I'll still devalue myself, or I'm the hardest on myself. And, we really all are that hard. But I really began to just practice these tools. And when something would come up, like with my kids, and I would feel guilty or devalued, I would say, what I tell other people, even though that happened, I love and accept myself. I forgive myself. I'm always doing the best I can with the resources that I have. And where my kids are concerned, I was always doing everything in my power to help them, to bring them forward. I never intentionally tried to hurt them, even though I did. And so now I come back and I'll say I'm sorry, or I'll humble myself, but the key for me, the bottom line, is walking my talk, because I can't do this unless I'm willing to go there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, probably one of the biggest impacts that it's had is, I mean, even transitioning into doing a lot of mindset work with people.
Uh-oh. You
This,
broke up. I'm sorry, Courtney, you broke up there.
so am I back?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Okay. It's a little bit of unstable
Internet.
down here. So I hate the instability of life. But like, it was just recall healing, and what I've learned from what you guys have taught me has really just shifted like my mindset on how I view things. Like anytime something comes up for me, it automatically, okay, I'm like, where am I out of alignment with myself? And doing the work on that. Like, I was never like that. But my number one question is if I'm feeling a little like my energy's low, or, I'm just not feeling like myself. I've come to like really just practice. Okay, hold up. Where am I out of alignment? What's going on with me? What's feeling like it's not in alignment with me and with God? And then I just go there. I'm like, oh, okay, what's been going on? Okay, all right, let me go after that. Like, I'm not scared to go after it anymore. And that's definitely
nice. Well, it's the whole thing about, like, I always give this analogy about, like, you're holding one side of the string, okay, and I'm holding the other, and I'm using the fishing rod to like reel it in, right? Okay, and you're holding it and holding it, but every time I'm rolling it in, it's getting more and more tightened, right? So ultimately that's going to snap. But if I move backwards into the tension, it loosens the tension. So instead of running away, which is the inclination, all of us, and that's why people don't want to talk about their emotions, because they can be quite painful. It can be, there's a lot there. And most people don't want to bring it to the surface, or they might feel weak or devalue or whatever, or we're told, oh, big girls don't cry, big boys don't cry. What's wrong with you? And it's not just our culture, Courtney, it's across the world, because I've gotten to teach in many parts of the world, and it's every culture. Emotions are a sign of weakness, okay? But as you know, when you speak with somebody and they share their feelings, the depth of their feeling, most of the time people feel more respect for them and more honor for their experience, because they're being real and authentic. And so when you move into the tension, it loosens the tension. And so that's beautiful how you said, like, I go there now, it's good, because that's the key, because the alternative is to stay in our yuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I don't sit in it very long. I actually was talking with someone, and we were talking about being in breakdown. And one of the things that, like, the revelation that I got just from like some leadership training and some things that I'm involved in, that it's in the breakdown, a good thing or a bad thing. It's kind of neutral, because we're going to experience breakdown, but it's not even about the breakdown. It's about how quickly we become aware where we're at to shift out of it, because breakdown always comes before our breakthrough.
Exactly, for sure.
And it has really shifted it.
When we have a saying in recall healing called name it, claim it, dump it. Okay. And so it's naming the issue, claiming the pain or whatever it was around that story, and then dumping it so you can move on. Well, sometimes, and so what you're talking about, that breakdown, it's sort of that same thing. Okay. But in that, sometimes we have to sit with it a little minute. We have to really honor where we're at, because we might be in a very painful place and not quite ready to move beyond it. So if we sit in it and honor it, then our brain and our body will give us that nudge. Okay, we can now move beyond it.
That's good. That's good. That actually really ties in nicely with, because we were talking about what your tag is.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and like just share that?
Okay.
Because I think
So my tagline is honor the past, live in the present, and create the future. And that just comes from really going back. And so many times when I'm working with people, they're like, oh, that was in the past and I don't need to deal with that anymore. But those feelings like, oh, my ex-husband, or, oh, my mother-in-law, those faces that you see, it's like, it says everything. Well, we actually have to go back there just for a little minute because we have to see how it's in line with all the patterns of our life. So if a big trauma happens at 5 years old, that sets us up for a pattern, for something to reoccur at 5 or at 10, sorry, at 15, at 20, all the way through our life. Okay, so when we move away, and we call them cycles, when we move away and this little thing comes up, and now I look and I say, oh, wait a minute, I'm 55 right now, which I'm not, so like we won't say that, but 55, what is this related to in my life? So then I might use the 5-year pattern, I might use an 11-year pattern. I would go back and see, where else have I felt this way? Mm-hmm. So that's what we call honoring, or what I call honoring the past. Claiming, it's like living in the present. What is coming up with me right now? What happened in my daily life? Where am I secretly suffering? Where am I not living in alliance and in alignment? And breathing into that, looking, maybe I need to shift some behaviors. Maybe I need to understand why, so that I can now live and create this beautiful future in my life. It's interesting because just right now, as I'm sharing the story, I'm thinking, recently for my mom, my mom's had so much trauma, really so much. And she's very afraid right now that for some reason that they were going to put her in a home because she's starting to decline and not function very well. And so my mom has said for years and years and years, don't put me in a home. She's so scared of a home. Well, now I understand. Just this weekend, I make the connection. My mom was given up for adoption. She was given to a home. So it was traumatic in that home, or those homes, 13 different homes. So the last thing her brain is going to want her to do is to go back there. But when she does go back there and name all these places, then she won't be so scared to go to a home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like that's, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So honor the past, live in the present, create the future.
Create the future. It's just such a beautiful statement. Like you really should copyright it, because I've used the heart of it a few times. I'm just like, man, that is just good. Because we are creative beings. I mean, we create whatever we think about. And, like we're made in God's image. He is the ultimate creator. So how are we not supposed to create? And I just love how, we really get into alignment with ourselves and what God's put us on this earth for. Just like you were put on this earth for a specific purpose. I'm put on this earth for a specific purpose. And this letting go of those limitations by honoring them, as, a historian and a theologist myself, like I get exactly what you're saying. We get to honor it, not criticize it. And then we get to be so present with people because all that stuff's like cleared out of our living in kind of the mediocrity of just going through life and not feeling purposeful.
Right. It's almost like just surviving and not living.
Thriving, not just surviving rather than thriving, but we get to thrive by being present.
Exactly.
And we're open to create whatever we're supposed to create, because every single person's put on this earth to create and for a purpose to like reach people. I mean, I can't reach the same people you reach, and everybody else. So I was going to ask you if there was one thing that you just really wanted to share with the audience, but I feel like you shared so much just now. Yeah, well, I'll ask you anyway, before we kind of wrap it up, was there one thing that you really just, like, it's on your heart to share right now?
I just would say, you know, like people are afraid of cancers and afraid of illnesses, and they think that they go, you know, around the corner, and that you get slapped in the face with an illness or something, but it never happens that way. It's really because of our secret suffering that things manifest in our body. And so I would say, begin to pay attention. If your knee hurts, if this hurts, if you have a cold, if you have coronavirus, you know, there's a reason that it's there. You will never get sick unless you have the conflict. So the people that are getting coronavirus, for instance, they had a conflict, okay? And corona means crown. So it could be maybe that there was a conflict with the authority or with leadership, began in China. So, I mean, we have to look at the very specific thing. A virus would come as a repair phase. So you have to be sick. One of the clients that I just work with, and I'll maybe leave you with this, but I just work with them today, and they're in Guatemala, and the guy said, I think I had coronavirus, okay, because 2 months ago in January, they flew into Los Angeles. Well, you know, many people were coming from China at that time. And so about a week after he had gotten home, he got a really bad chest infection. He had a hard time breathing. It hurt so much. And, you know, he ultimately got over it, but it was a big deal. It was like he said, I've never been so sick in my life. And it was related to the lungs and all of this. Well, for the last 7 years, they have been dealing with a daughter who had a brain trauma. And the daughter ended up having to stop going to school and dropping out of college, and spent the next 7 years sort of healing, and went to different places to get support. I've had the opportunity to work with them for a few years now. And so it's been beautiful. So I've watched all of them sort of grow and evolve. Well, in January is when their daughter went back to school to now start her life again. And then he got sick. So it works like that. Lungs are about territory, sadness, grief, feeling stuck. He felt stuck with his daughter. He thought, oh my gosh, is she ever going to be independent and on her own? Are we going to have to take care of her for the rest of our life? She would have different episodes that were all encompassing for the family. It was a big deal. So big deal means big sickness when you don't walk through it every single day.
Perfect way to wrap it up. I mean, yeah. Wow. Such a time as this. You know, Doc, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your knowledge and everything, taking time out of your day. I really do appreciate it, especially for the time in the space, just explaining all that in such a clear way. I really do appreciate everything that you do. And like, it's just the way that we get to serve our community. And I really do appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney. And I really appreciate you, and I love what you're doing, and, you know, the ministry that you have been given and are going with, and however I can support that, I'm happy to do that. So thank you so much for this honor.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, everyone, stay tuned for our next interview. Just pay attention to the email and you'll get another one come through. We've got exciting stuff going on, and I think we might have Dr. Michelle Schrader come on again soon. So.
I love that.